Good evening and welcome to Nycos Nightly News. I'm your host, Throckmorton P. Thidwhistle, and I am a registered journalist with the Gnome News Network, and we are attempting to reestablish contact. So to all the ships at sea and all adventurers within the campaign and without, welcome to our reports. Now, before we get started, make sure you go down below and push all the buttons so that the algorithm knows that you're part of our audience, and let's get underway.
Absorbing damage is the name of the game. From the claws of monsters or the heat from a ball of flame, our strength in numbers is a roll of the dice.
All right, welcome to Nycos, and I'm going to be doing something that we haven't done to this point, and that is to do an overall overview of what is going on in the world of Nycos during this 9th iteration. This is a rather expansive portion of the episode tonight, and then we will move on to the specific reports from our games groups. But until then, let's just get started. So, Nycos, as you may know, is a planet known as the planet of the prisms and has a long-term process that recycles iteration over iteration. And each of the iterations is roughly 6 to 7 years real time, which equates to us being in the 9th iteration, as we have completely played through the cycle 8 times before. And we are roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of the way through this iteration. It varies by what the players do, and with 3 groups churning away in different directions on different pieces, we're not sure when the iteration will end, but we do have at least the purpose to deal with as a means of doing so. I will be making a specific video about the purpose coming up in the next week or so to provide you with information about how the iteration advances as a possible resource that other players can use as well. But at this point, we need to talk about the particularly current affairs that are going on in the world of Nycos. At this point, the completion of the the mortal population's intention of recreating the grand governance that was the Empire of Man from several iterations ago is on the brink of becoming yet another reality. The forces out of the major cities of the north, such as Mantra to the far west, to Burglecut in the far east, are both advancing towards the liberation of their particular regions, while the Middle Kingdoms, the combined forces of the Empire and his allies, has fundamentally established a stranglehold on the middle countries. There is a force of resistance fighters under the leadership of the Luthanin, a self-appointed champion, in particular the last of the elves, who is currently moving his armies in the north country between a couple of cities, and due to several let's just call it a series of misfortunate events, the Empire's forces the Luthanin's forces have been unable to liberate their allies to the north. We'll have more information on each individual kingdom during the actual news reports portion of this show, but I wanted to make sure that you had everything you need to know about that. And this means even the few factionless cities have been either neutralized in terms of politics or isolated in terms of military from the actions of the others. And in a relatively new change of events, it appears that the sec-gen kingdoms, both east and west, both Marowin and Bathrikin, have also acceded to the Imperator's wishes to reestablish unification in terms of trade and to cease hostilities in those areas where they would have boundaries. Now, that does not mean that the empire is not still on the march, as there are considerable kingdoms that have not yet bent the knee. For example, the nation state of Omara still holds its own, as does, and that's to the west, whereas in the east, the city state of Potiphar remains doggedly independent. And so between these two ends, the imperator's forces have come to somewhat a stalemate in the middle countries. To the far south, in the west, in the area of Groenland, it appears that the kingdom of Cibola has remained independent, while the formerly independent nation of Mercania and their capital city of Mercia has actually bent the knee and has agreed to take on funding, thereby establishing their mercenary structure is going to be supportive of the empire. So though they do have members that are not part of the mortal population, nonetheless the governance of the area has literally agreed to reestablish an area of unification with the mortal population and has reinstituted a separate section of their own country dedicated to the empire. And these areas have been given royal title by the imperator and therefore are now being considered the Knighted States of Murka. It's an ancient name that hasn't been used in iterations, and so the fact that they've been reestablished and are flying the red, white, and blue banners of the former theocratic government is very interesting as far as an establishment within this current iteration. Final thing I want to talk about is that there's been an incursion of a species known as the Gar. The Gar are a mortal population that has not been seen in several iterations. They are predominantly a maritime nation utilizing red or crimson sails, and they have made landfall near the city of Canaveral and are currently moving to besiege that port city. Since that is far to the east and outside of the general trade routes normally established between nations, this has been largely overlooked by the other nations. So they have actually, the city-state of Canaveral has put out a plea to the other nations requesting support, in addition to the surprising turn of events wherein the Mir have actually withdrawn from the city of Canaveral, leaving it to its own devices. No one's quite sure why this has happened. Nonetheless, it is, again, an area of concern that has not been pursued yet by the adventurers in the campaigns. So now we're going to go ahead and get started with the local reports, and although these are from the same chronological period, crossing my fingers, asterisk, etc., more of that in later episodes, but let's get on to the individual stories based on details from these particular games groups. Now, for clarity, there are currently 3 campaigns operating. One is called The Heralds of the Change and is largely represented by the Luthanin himself, as well as a alleged queen of Cryopathia, who of late was thought to be assassinated and then discovered to be in hiding. So there's some question about that, but there's tales that come from the Heralds of the Change. There are also stories that will be coming to us from Strangers in a Strange Land. These are adventurers who somehow, by twist of fate, survived the last iterational change and are therefore finding themselves in a world that's radically different from the one that they had come into being and established themselves within. And then the third adventure group are currently known as the Skiffborn, and these are all three operating at the same time throughout the world of Nycos. And although the stories that I'm going to be reciting are all occurring in the same chronological period, they are not necessarily coming from any particular adventuring group. All right, so in reference to the Luthanen's forces that had last been reported fundamentally trapped in the cradle of the Red Mother, which is a valley in the mountain range wherein the Red Mother is the largest mountain, have themselves finally been rescued, if you will, as forces from the north, which had been called for but had not yet answered, did arrive, and 2 full legions of the Gildan Tide, that is the armies of the Aruk, have arrived. Fundamentally, they are spider-riding cavalry associated with the Shattered Stones region of Nycos, and they have laid claim once again to that area under its ancient name of Shun Tru'a. And so this arrival bodes well, as they are somewhat of a merger line between the Luthanen's allies, known as the Arachnis, spider beings from the Everdark, and the Eldrin forces of Nyx, who have been the primary mainstay of the Luthanen's army. So with their recovery, they are intending to march on toward Bastion. But we do have additional news about Bastion that we'll need to cover before we can resolve that request, or that element of the story. A second thing that was noted is that the forces of Mantara, who have been by and large funnily non-combative in this iteration, are now known to be on the march with at least a legion plus an artifact that they recently excavated from the Sea of Sand. And this large object, this veritable titan that is associated with them, is lumbering its way south into the Sea of Sand. It is apparent that they are moving toward the city of Nexus, which at last report was fundamentally making an all nations call for aid, as they were being assaulted by a surprisingly large force of Urgluk and Groll marching up from the south. And so it may be that Mantara is intending to be part of the liberating force of Nexus, or perhaps they have even more nefarious plans for what they're going to be doing in that area of the world. The third Nycos nugget that you need to know is that, alas, despite the hopes against hope that Bastion could withstand the Empire's forces, it does appear that they have fallen, although reports are sketchy, as it seems that they actually opened the gates and invited the Imperator's forces within. This falls on the heel of what is being called the Night of Songs, as the Imperator's forces, with the assistance of a half dozen or so of the priest kings, held a impromptu concert and apparently lulled the city defenses into complacency and have therefore taken the city. There are wide rumors of abuses being exacted upon the population, and we are endeavoring to get agents into the city that can provide us with this information, and will be able to offer details about what's going on there and perhaps find a way to liberate the city from the clutches of the empire. Although this is arguably the first time that the name Darkenval has actually been mentioned in direct contact with the Bastion forces, it does appear that Darkenval himself was present at the opening of the gates. So much form and much, what do they say? It's more an act of being seen than an act of actual victory, as the defeat seems to be at the hands of some fell magics rather than a fair fight or a relinquished besieged kingdom. More on that later. On another front, in another part of the world, one of the adventure groups has begun a process of storm abatement and have indeed begun and ended a storm of their own origin in a relatively short period of time, although countless affronts and incursions between the two may have occurred. This is happening in the area of near. Why did my brain just freeze on me? I could pull up the maps, but that would be cheating since I'm trying to make this as impromptu as possible. This is in the Farthful, far to the south, near to the now independent Sibylla. And so am I saying that right? Yeah, I'm going to use that name for now, but I believe that I'm saying it wrong. I'll think of it in a second. I know that the city of Tenerife is the capital of this breakaway country, and so it appears that the Secgen and mortal populations of Tenerife have liberated themselves from the oppressive forces that had been pushing them towards joining the empire. So this is arguably a good thing, and it has, I believe, in large part been attributed to the fact that the Urgluk populations of the I've done it to myself again. I really should have the map up here. I'm supposed to be the guy that knows all of this stuff. Well, we'll get to it again. Ushtish. The kingdom of Ushtish and its capital Rust have apparently pulled out of the southern war and determined instead to concentrate their forces north after having broken through the Khanate of Greek and have moved northward and have apparently indeed broken through and taken Nexus. So the advantage here is that a storm apparently has been created and eliminated by the mortals and the other involved personnel operating now in the Farthful region. More information on that as the campaign continues, of course. All right, so on a completely separate note, and this is more of a advisory in terms of chronology, to let the adventurers of all campaigns know that as of this broadcast, Jasper, Theodophilus, Bel, and Vincus have been liberated, with an asterisk on Vincus. More on that momentarily, but these are the names known of the these great weapons of power, also known as the items of power, depending on where you look for them in the iterational histories. And in particular, this represents the red, green, orange, and blue artifacts their manifestations are going to be available from anybody who gets involved with the campaign. If you want to find out how to do that and become a part of our community, you can join us at patreon.com/Nycos, and members do get access to the current lore dumps that the players have access to through our Discord channel. So the fact that 4 of them have been found means that there are fundamentally 2 or 3 remaining, with the concept that each primary color of the rainbow, red, green, blue, orange, yellow, and purple. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. Yeah, that's the 6 ostensive colors. And it is also noted that there apparently is at this point a 7th prism that has been formed and is being carried by yet another member of the Enjoined, which means either it is one of the 7 or it may be the one that is not one, although, well, we'll get to the one out of time momentarily. So one of the story threads that actually dates back into the pre-iteration days of the last iteration, that is to say, an 8th iteration artifact remains, which is known as the Mask of Baphomet. And although it was sought throughout the entirety of the 8th iteration, it had avoided being discovered, and indeed is currently still in existence in the world. Now, the good news is that it appears that one of the Enjoined has indeed attained the item, but there has not been any move yet made to destroy it. And so the threat that Baphomet might actually return from his banishment resides and depends on the destruction of this outstanding item, this mask. The description given for it is a feathered mask that has taken or is in the form of an oversized owl, literally to be worn as a mask over the face, and according to the legend will grant the wearer of it, the very powers that remain of Baphomet. So be on the lookout for it and endeavor to assist where you can to help get it destroyed. In an interesting turn of events, the Skiffborn have found themselves in a place where they have categorically affirmed the identity of this renegade Eldrin by the name of Malsalil. He has at times been theorized to be a gray Eldrin or a Primus or even a Traloran, and they have established now through physical identification and recognition by people who have been in his presence that Malsalil is indeed Traloran. This is somewhat troublesome, as it does suggest that the Tralorans as a people may be behind the mischief of the Imperator, as Darken Val is also known to be of the Traloran species. So let's just say Byzantine troubles are ahead, as they have discovered that there is a line of the Tralorans that has indeed breached the bloodlines of the Primus and have actually clarified for themselves a place on the Feyre courts in the realm of the Fey, which is currently being protected by the soul transfer point in the world known as Nyx. So there are rumors, therefore, that there may be direct assaults on Nyx to attempt to wrest control of that gateway and fundamentally shut it down to prevent Malsalil and his ilk being able to access it, but this is yet to be seen. So, in an associated story, we did mention that the Urglik have indeed overrun Nexus. Apparently, the siege has not been lifted, nor has it been resolved, as a great number of the population of Nexus have withdrawn into their ancient ruins beneath the city. And it's even suggested that there are sufficient individuals well enough trained within the dome that they might actually invoke the ancient protections on the city. Now, there were curses and warnings placed upon the city's dome in the 6th iteration, suggesting that it should never be reactivated. Nonetheless, the desperate times required desperate measures, and it appears that the population of Nexus, which is by and large mortal and secgen, may indeed go ahead and activate that defensive position. So more on that also as the story moves forward. And this story is coming out of the area of Cryopathia. It appears that the eastern segment of the former nation of Cryopathia has been annexed by the Eldrin population, supporting the second of the Eldrin home trees, called the Aelcris. And according to the suggestions, the Luthanin and his forces, who had been traveling by a tech balloon, has apparently been indeed shot down, captured, and returned to the Aelcris to stand trial for the crimes. Now, there is a also loosely suggested rumor that the Queen of Cryopathia had been in his care, or his retinue, and so there may be more at stake here, as it's advised that the people of Cryopathia may attempt to ransom the Queen from this situation, leaving the Luthanin to his own devices, as he is a foreigner from the faraway land of Nyx. So we will see what this comes down to. It does appear that an individual member of that retinue by the name of Spectacles may have actually affected his own release by negotiating through the Queen's bodyguard, Duvero, and may actually be at this point free within the city. But we have limited information on that, as we have not yet been able to put any gnomes in the field for that report. And the ravens, of course, cannot be sent when you are under duress or unable to get yourself to one of the launch sites. Alrighty, so now finally the moment you've all been waiting for. We are looking for additional members for each of these campaigns. Now, 2 of them are live at Board Game Paradise, although we are working on trying to find a way to be able to incorporate players from the net at that location. Nonetheless, those groups play on Mondays and Tuesdays, 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. local time, Southern California, which is Pacific Zone. And if you are in the area and would love to join us, we're glad to have you. And those sessions do have a table fee, but if you're coming just from a mere visit and you are established that you're a subscriber to the Nycos RPG channel, you'll be able to bypass that price. It's $10 per session, which is not a burden, but nonetheless, if you want to play, all you simply have to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, show up at the game session, and immediately be added to our play group. The third campaign is our Patreon-only support group, and the Patreon supporters become able to play at the $20 level. So if you support patreon.com/Nycos at $20, you gain access to all of our live stream games, and we will be adding more in the future as we go along. So with that, I'm asking if you'd like to play. You're more than welcome. The age limits are if you wish to play and you are if you have children, they can play if their age is 8 or above, and you're going to play with them. Unaccompanied players need to be at least 14, and if we do eventually go to live streaming, there will be a waiver that will be required. But that's it. If you want to be a part of our games, there are plenty of ways to do so. If you're a game master and you want to run in the Nycos campaign setting, please reach out to me and I'll provide you the methodologies so that you can gain not only the rules to the Nycos RPG mechanism, but also the back-end lore to the world so that you can utilize the resources of it for your particular campaign. All right, I want to thank you again for being here. I'm Jonathan Albin. This has been Nycos Nightly News, and we will see you in the next time. Bye. Oh, don't forget, go play.